Alright, so we're about 2 months into Arks of Omen, and let's rank some Custodes units. Uh, just for context, what has changed in Arks of Omen in general? So the main change is the Arks of Omen detachment. What the Arks of Omen detachment means is that the mandatory Force Org slot in your list is up to you. So you can pick 3 troops, 3 fast attack, 3 elites, etc. This is very good for Custodes because previously you have to take 3 troops essentially, and our troops are expensive and not necessarily what you wanted to take every single game. So instead of spending 400 points on troops and then 1600 points on the stuff you actually want, now you can spend all 2000 of your points on stuff you actually want to use. As far as Custodes specific changes in Arks of Omen, the first change is that all non-character Custodes infantry are objective secured again. So things like Wardens, the Terminators, and Venatari, they all have their OBSEC back. And the next change is any clause in the balance data slate that limited a stratagem's use to once a game is just gone. So you can use all the stratagems as many times as you want over the course of the game. As far as how I do the tier lists, it's all just statistics. I just look at the frequency of lists that have a particular unit. If it's, if a unit's never used, it goes in the bottom tier. If it's used every single game, I'm putting it in the S tier. So let's get started. The Ek list was used 3 times out of 17 X and 1 or better lists this season. So that means, 4 and 1, 5 and 1, 6 and 0, etc. So it's used 3 times, which is a decent amount of time. It's like just under 20%. I still think it has a unique offensive profile in the list or in the roster of Custodes units, so there's some value there, but it's just not being used as much as before because of MSU infantry units that can kind of replace its role, which we'll get to later. So we'll put it in the B tier. Next we have Alea. She was used a couple times. She's cheap. She fights on death. She gives you access to the deny stratagem, being a Sister of Silence. And she's just alright. We'll put her in C tier. Alaris Terminators, straight to the top. S tier. Used in almost every single list. I think it's like 95% of the time. They are OBSEC now. Behind enemy lines got buffed, so a single Terminator getting in your opponent's deployment zone is 3 victory points, which is completely insane. And yeah, they're just excellent. You can basically start every Custodes list with 2 or 3 units of 1 Terminator, and it's just very good. Aquilon Unused, they're 70 points. You can't take them in units of 1, so there's just not really a reason to use them instead of Alaris Terminators. The Flyer Unused, Mr. Bike Captain, S tier. So he was used roughly 70% of the time. The fact that you don't need to take 2 HQs anymore, and you still do so very often, is just a testament to how good this guy is, even though he's expensive and he costs CP and all that fun stuff. He's just excellent. And then again, when he eventually gets in your opponent's deployment zone, you're getting an extra victory point now when he does that, assuming you take behind enemy lines. So he's great. He's an S tier. The Blade Champion, he was used once, so we'll put him in C tier. There's like a niche reason to use him. I think that he's fallen off a little bit because taking cheap HQs just has a little bit less value because you're not really encouraged to take more than 1, or you're not forced to take more than 1, I should say. But people, or I guess 1 person, still found a reason to use him, so we'll put him in C tier. The Caladius, it was used, I think, in 20% of lists or so, 4 times. So the Caladius is still good. I think that the Blaze Cannon has gone up in value with things like Iron Hands and Imperial Guard out there, but people are finding other ways to spend their points, and so it's just okay. It's nothing crazy. The regular Shield Captain, I didn't see him in a list. Maybe I missed it. It's a little bit hard to search for specifically the generic Shield Captain when I'm looking through the database, but I didn't see him used, so we'll put him in the unused tier. This was unused. The regular Contemptor Dread was used once. I believe the list had multiple, and it was running Trajan and Empress Chosen and doing the whole combo where effectively you're handing your opponent 2 multi-multi saves every single time one of them shoots, which is pretty good. I've done it before. But again, for the points, there's just more efficient units I think you can get now, and more reliable units you can get. The Galatus was unused. I think that you could obviously make the argument that it's around as good as any of the other Contemptors. It just didn't see play. And I think its offensive profile just isn't that unique in the army. Regular Custodians, we'll put them in B tier. They're used just under 50% of the time, and you're not forced to take them anymore. So they're obviously okay. They've never been bad. Sagittarum are basically just as likely to be seen in lists as these guys, so we'll put them in the same spot. There's no icon for Sagittarum, so just pretend that they represent both units. And that's where I'd put them. Land Raider, not used. Rhino, not used. This Flyer, not used. The Palace, unused. I think that the Palace is probably the best of everything in this tier, just because it's fast and it's cheap and it scores behind enemy lines. But again, it wasn't used, so putting in the bottom tier. Bikes. We're going to put bikes in A tier, and we're going to put them at the top. So 70% of lists, even though bikes were effectively untouched by the balance changes, right? They're not infantry. They don't use any of those stratagems. They're still just super essential to the army. They're fast. They hit hard. And they just give a degree of flexibility that the army needs. So they're still borderline required, in my opinion. These are... what are these? Prosecutors? We're going to put them in C tier. I think one list still ran Prosecutors just as a cheap backfield objective holder, which is totally fair. But now that you don't need to take troops, really, there's just much less incentive to use them. This is a Knight Centura. I believe one list had a Knight Centura in it. She has the Warlord trait to remove OBSEC, which has some value, especially with the amount of OBSEC we bring now. So I think that she's okay, but nothing crazy. There's like a niche use case, so we'll put her in C tier. This is the Terminator Captain. We'll put him in B tier. So I believe he was used 3 times, so around as likely as the Achilles Dreadnought. And he's just fine. He is pretty cheap. He can do behind enemy lines. He has the heroic intervention across the map with his Praetorian plate. And yeah, he's pretty decent. The Telemon is unused. I think that with shooting armies, currently the strongest shooting army is effectively like ignore your toughness, right? So Votann ignore your toughness, and Guard, oftentimes they're born soldiers and they're auto wounding you, so being toughness 8 is irrelevant. And a lot of their bigger guns are higher than toughness 8 anyways, so he just dies. He's really not nearly as durable as he needs to be. Trajan, King Trajan. Every single list that went X and 1 or better, all 17, they all have Trajan. He's amazing. And in the new meta for Custodes, which is taking our infantry units, he's even better than he was before, because infantry are more likely to be using Katas than, say, before. People are using bikes and dreads. They don't, well, the dreadnoughts don't benefit from Katas, but infantry do. So Trajan giving you more flexibility with those is nice. Those units are more likely to be within his aura, and his aura is very powerful. And his heroic intervention is also more likely to be used because you're kind of clumping around him with all these infantry units. So he's excellent. He's even better than he was before somehow. And yeah, he's the best unit in the book. Next, we have the Terminator Vex. I'm going to rank both the Vexillas at the same time. So the regular Vexilla I put in A because, again, now that we're blobbing up more, we're using more infantry, and we're clumping up with all these auras, it's kind of just natural to put the Vexilla in a list and put -1 to hit on all those units. The Terminator Vex I just put in C because you're spending more points for effectively the same thing. But someone did use them, and if you have a few spare points lying around, getting an extra wound is decent. Valerian was used. He's cheap, and he does provide the ignoring of the phase caps, which is fine, and it's pretty unique to our army, which really struggles against phase capped units. I still don't think it's that it's that amazing of a solution to the problem, but it is a solution, so fair enough. Venatari, probably one of the two most improved units. We're going to put them ahead of the Vex. They are in over 50% of lists have some Venatari in it, usually multiple. They're fast, they're obsec, they do actions. Offensively, they're quite strong. They kind of do it all. They really are such an all-star unit and a great all-rounder unit. Being obsec really just makes them so much better than they were before. Because for a difference of, I want to say it's 5 points or 10 points a model, you're getting 12 inches of move and fly. So they're quite great. Next, I think these are called Vigilators. They actually were used once. Again, if you want a backfield objective holder that isn't completely horrible if they get stuck in melee, they're pretty decent. And so we'll put them in the C tier, because again, they were used once. And here we have sort of the, if you've been following the storylines regarding Custodes in Arks of Omen, Wardens. They only show up in 50% of lists, but when they show up, you're usually spending 1,000 points of your army on Wardens. They, for a difference of 5 points from a regular Custodian, you're getting an extra attack, and you're getting the 6-up Feel No Pain, which against damage 3 weapons just really messes with efficiency because you effectively have a 50% chance of tanking an extra shot per model. And with the stratagem support being much more improved, because you can just, turn off rerolls and transhuman this unit every single turn, they're excellent. So they are in A tier. Probably the most improved unit. Here we have, these are Witch Seekers, which we're going to put right underneath the generic Custodians. So Witch Seekers, they have a pregame move, and that is actually very valuable, because what can happen, especially this meta, which is pretty alpha strikey, is you deploy, and you look at the terrain and the way that the obscuring is set up, and you're like, well, if my opponent puts a drop pod here, or deep strikes a Casterkin unit here, I'm in big trouble. Well, you just move a Witch Seeker unit pre-game into that zone. Yes, they're gonna die, but your bikers aren't dying, or your Caladius tank isn't dying. Which is obviously very valuable. Additionally, they can pre-game move and put down a banner on turn 1, which is awesome. So this is how I'd rank the units. I think that things like the Dreads, they've fallen off because shooting has just gotten more powerful. Guard do not care about the Dread. Like, Guard will just pull the Dreadnoughts off the board. They really don't care. And I think the argument now is, well, why spend 160-ish points on Dreadnought when I could, for the same price, get a Venatari unit that they can put down banners, they're faster, sure, they're a little bit less durable, but offensively they're debatably the same, they have decent shooting, and it's just an easier sell, I think, for things like Venatari. Wardens, you can build a whole army around them, they're insanely durable with the right stratagem support. They synergize very well with Trajan, who's one of the best units in the book. And this is sort of the new face of the army, which is our very elite and tanky infantry rather than our vehicles. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you guys think. Peace.